You're a pragmatic person. You're thinking a few steps ahead, you're thinking about your future, you're investing in yourself, in future versions of you, but you have this one bad, nagging habit that's quietly holding you back. It's a habit that gives you this heavy feeling in your chest. It's a habit that affects you so deeply sometimes that it makes you just want to throw your hands up and quit. And that habit is nostalgia. Nostalgia is like reverse anxiety, except it's worse because anxiety is worrying about the future, which is unwritten and can have infinite possibilities, whereas nostalgia is living in the past, a story that's already been written, that can't be changed. Now, something I want you to keep in mind for the patriarchy hack, the loophole that I'm going to discuss in a few minutes, is that patriarchy fetishizes and glorifies youth while it disdains and demonizes aging. And we subconsciously mirror that without even knowing it. We look back at the past and think about how good things used to be, how skinny we looked, how tight our skin was, how young we looked. And we're thinking of all this while fearing what the future holds for us. But remember that patriarchy is the inversion of the truth. Because it's an institutionalized defense mechanism, everything that it tells you is actually a lie. And when you look right beneath it, that's when you find the truth. So right beneath that fetishization of youth is the truth. But you're too stuck in the past to realize that. So you're mirroring the zero-sum thinking that the patriarchy needs to exist because it creates an artificial scarcity that makes us think that the past version of ourselves took something away from the current and future versions of ourselves. But let me tell you something. The past is dead. The future is unborn, and the only thing that's alive is the present. And when you're stuck in the past, you're like this zombie operating in the present. You're like a half-awake version of yourself. And this episode is going to be your wake-up call. Like I mentioned a few moments ago, patriarchy is the inversion of the truth. Whatever the patriarchy tells you, flip it, and that's when you have the truth. So the patriarchy hack that we're going to talk about today in terms of getting rid of your nostalgia, that hack is in understanding the inversion and then using that to your benefit. Because beneath the patriarchal lie is the loophole. Because it's an institutionalized defense mechanism, it needs to sell you a lie. It needs to brainwash us to believe in a trait, in a behavior that would make us less powerful, that would make us tame ourselves. Because if we were to understand the truth and harness the truth and self-actualize based on the truth, then we would be too powerful and that would be too dangerous for the system. We would threaten the status quo. So patriarchy ties value to youth and it fetishizes youth. And it makes us think that our value diminishes as we age, as we become shriveled up old hags. And it uses things like the biological clock, which I've talked about many times on this show. I did a whole episode about who invented the term biological clock and what his agenda was. Spoiler, it was a journalist writing in the 1970s. And guess what? His biological clock ticked and he died, past tense of die, in 2024. So sucks to suck. So patriarchy wants us to think that we expire. And that's a distraction tactic from two things in particular. The first thing is that it's trying to distract us from the fact that the future is abundant. Unlike the past, which is dead, and the present, which is currently happening, the future holds infinite possibilities. But the patriarchy operates based on a zero-sum mentality. It creates artificial scarcity. It tells us that good men are scarce. It tells us that we have to find a good man soon because our biological clock is going to tick before we hit 40 and we're going to expire. And so through all these different forms of artificial scarcity, it tries to pressure us and rush us into decisions that will then trap us, lock us down, tame us. Because any decision you make out of rush and pressure is a bad decision. And it's one that you're going to regret. But that's great because when you're in this state of desperation, you make emotional decisions and then you trap yourself with things that are either very hard or impossible to go back on. So that's the first thing that it tries to distract us from. The second thing is that by fetishizing and glorifying and romanticizing youth, patriarchy distracts us from the fact that a self-actualized woman is the absolute highest form of being. I've mentioned this before. Just being born a woman doesn't necessarily make you a good person. It is being a self-actualized woman, a woman who has unconditional self-love, who knows her worth, won't compromise on her boundaries, who knows the unique thing that she offers the world. Not financially or materially, but what is it that's unique about you? What is it that makes you the only, not the best, but the only? That's when you're not going to jump through hoops. You're not going to be a doormat. You're not going to do anything for men because you know that their job is to serve you. That's when you stop begging and giving and being, please, please, ma'am, please respect me, like me, love me, give me what I want. You stop acting a fool and you stand 10 toes down on business, okay? But that makes you too powerful. So I'm saying it makes you too powerful. So the system doesn't want you to do that. So the system needs to distract you from that and keeping you stuck in the past, mentally stuck in a location that you physically left is the perfect way to keep you debilitated. That is the foundation of what we're going to talk about today. And I don't look back unless I'm looking back at it. You know what I'm saying? Also, hi, I am Nikki, your host. I am the baddest bitch in the building, not to be confused with you, who's also the baddest bitch in the building. And today we are on hack 36. How on earth we got to 36, I don't know. I feel like we were just on hack 8. If you are new, welcome. I have 35 other hacks that you can go binge after this. And I also have my first 20 hacks updated, revised, and polished in book format in my book, How to Hack the Patriarchy. So if you already have my book, then you have a better version of my first 20 patriarchy hacks in your hands, assuming you're holding the book right now, which you're probably not because you're doing something else. Anyways, this show is about how to find the patriarchy's loopholes, exploit them, and unlearn how the system has conditioned us to be good, nice, humble, guilty, small little girls. All right, I consider this the ultimate Uno reverse on the patriarchy. So, hack 36. Avoid nostalgia like the plague. So, we're going to talk about 4 things that we need to unlearn. The first thing is fear. A lot of us live in the past because of our fear of the future. And that fear is usually fueled by your outdated software, by the beliefs and the values and the behaviors and the mindsets that you have based on previous experiences, based on things that people may have said to you or done to you in a past life, 5, 10, 20, 50 years ago, based on things people may have said to you, people who are not even in your life, people who are not even in your life right now, but still somehow live in your head rent-free and somehow still steer your decisions. Get fucking real. I say this with love. So for a lot of us, the past is a safe place to be because that story has already been written. We know how it ends. It's like rewatching the same TV shows and movies and rereading the same books. I love rereading Harry Potter every year. I know exactly what's going to happen. I almost memorized the freaking series, but it's comforting to know what's going to happen next. It's comforting to read a story when you know how it's going to end. So for a lot of us, living in the past is our escape route. Instead of updating our outdated software, it's easier to keep that iOS going and simply go into the past. I feel like I have a half-baked analogy about how your iPhone battery gets weaker with every update as your phone gets older, but I can't really think of one right now. Maybe you can think of one and write them in the comments. Now, why is the past your escape route? Because you've made a decision to stay mentally stuck in a location that you physically left before you even gave yourself a chance. Gave yourself a chance to go to a new location. Gave yourself a chance to do something that might scare you but might have a payoff. And by doing that, listen closely, by doing that, you're mirroring the patriarchy because it's conditioned you to fear aging, to fear the future, to think you're going to be a shriveled up old hag as time goes on, whose value is diminishing. You're holding on to the past so hard. You're living in a dead version of reality because you are scared. But if you look beneath that fear, you'll probably see some low-grade excitement. I don't know if fear and excitement draw on the same brain circuits or something, but they usually tend to be linked. They usually tend to happen at the same time. So to wrap up this first item that we need to unlearn, which is our fear, you need to understand how much of the way you function in your day-to-day life, in your day-to-day decision-making, is caused by your outdated software. And that outdated software runs on fear and doubt, which I've talked about before. Item number 2 that we need to unlearn. Some might call it guilt, some might call it grief. It depends on which one suits you. But it's our guilt or our grief, okay? It's the thought that, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Or things were so much better for me before. Look at what I was doing before. I was so skinny. I was making so much money. I was so much happier. La, 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 la. Everything was so much better in the past. Oh my God, it was so much better. And you lament the past. You grieve the past. And let me tell you something. If the past was meant to persist, then it would be the present. Okay, but it's not. That thing, that relationship, that situation, that job, that whatever ended because it needed to, because it belongs in the past. Okay, but you are too caught up in your grief or your guilt to understand that. You keep thinking, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said this. I shouldn't have chosen that. Or you lament the past. Oh, I used to be so much better off. And you end up in the victimella mindset. You become victimella because you think that you are now worse off than you were before, which honestly you might be. But you know what's not going to make you better off? Being victimella, grieving, lamenting, feeling guilty. Okay, so cut it out. The third thing you need to unlearn is the pleasantness of the past. The past is an illusion. What I mean by that is we see the past through rose-colored glasses. Because our recollection is usually spotty, if not wrong, we look back at the past and we either remember it incorrectly or we remember it with a bunch of gaps. And so we fill in those gaps with fantasy, projection, and romanticization. So when we fill in the gaps with all of these things to make the past seem more pleasant, of course the grass is going to look like it was greener in the past. It's like you're looking at the past with that high contrast 2016 Instagram filter. You know the one I'm talking about. But that's just because you've rewritten that story in a way that suits your narrative or that suits your mood or your disposition. So we remember things incorrectly. And that's not to say that the past doesn't have lots of pleasant memories. I look on a lot of things in the past very fondly, but what we need to unlearn here is the fact that we tend to fill in the gaps a lot of the time with our own romanticization. We always think, oh, everything used to be so much better in the past, but then we don't really think of all the things that were a lot worse in the past that are a lot better now. And on this point specifically, I'm going to dissect this a little bit further and talk more about how to undo this beautiful 2020 rose-colored hindsight. But we'll get back to that a little bit later in the episode. The fourth thing we need to unlearn is our zero-sum thinking. It's the way that we compete with past versions of ourselves. And I need to give a shout out to one of you baddies on Patreon who talked about competing with previous versions of yourself, because I had this Patreon episode where I crashed out in May, and I was just talking about it on my Patreon. It was just a video I recorded from my car, and I got a lot of great comments from the Patreon baddies, and one of you mentioned how it's really easy to fall into this trap of competing with previous versions of yourself. And that's almost, that's like competing with other women, but in a different font. And for a lot of us, we think that because you did something once, you can never do it again. It's like the previous version of yourself took something away from the current or the future version of yourself. And if you did it once, that's it. You can't do it again. Instead of thinking, if I did this once, that means I can do it again, because that means it was possible. You reverse your thinking and you mirror the way the patriarchy operates and it wants you to think, which is in a zero-sum way. If I win, that means someone else lost. If past me won, future me has to lose. Which doesn't make sense, because like I said, the future is the only version of time. Version is not the right word. Like dimension of time? I don't freaking know. But the future is the only of time that is abundant, that is unwritten, that has infinite possibilities. So to have a zero-sum way of thinking about the future is so backwards, because it's in complete contradiction to the way the future actually operates, to the nature of the future. I sound like the keynote speaker at the Wackadoodle convention, but this is true. When the revolution comes, you're going to look back on this episode and you're going to be like, yep, Nikki was right. Come back to this in a few years and let me know. Okay. Oh, there's one more thing in my notes. You might even have envy. You might envy the previous version of yourself. I've experienced this a lot too. You look back on something great that you did, something big that you achieved, whatever it is. You look back on that and you envy that previous version of you. You're like, oh my God, like I wish I could have that. As if you weren't the one who fucking accomplished it and can do it again. Like, be so, don't piss me off. Okay. So those are the 4 things we need to unlearn. I'll recap them for you. Number 1 is fear. Number 2, guilt or grief or both. Number 3, the pleasantness of the past that we create through filling in the gaps. And number 4, zero-sum thinking. Okay, so those are the 4 things we need to unlearn. I'm listing them off as if it's like an easy checklist for you to unlearn, but these are things that can take you weeks or months or years. But now you're aware of them. So all of this points to the fact that the true choose your own adventure is the future. So how do we choose the best adventure for ourselves? Hey baddies, it's Editing Nikki, and I just wanted to take a moment to talk about our Lord and Savior. I'm just kidding. Could you imagine? No, what I really wanted to talk about is how you are missing out on a bunch of content if you are not subscribed to my Patreon. That is where I have not only bonus episodes, but episodes that I deleted from my main feed, some of my really old episodes that are never going to see the light of day again, episodes that I recorded but simply decided I don't want to make them public, and all sorts of other perks like voting power on my girly laws, access to the baddie hotline, which is a phone number to the phone on my desk that you can call I'll pick up like 50% of the time, depending on how busy I am. Birthday, cameo videos, and all sorts of other perks. Check it out if you like. I will leave the link in the show notes. And in the meantime, don't forget that I am happy that you are here. All right, let's get back to the show. And don't forget about our Lord and Savior, okay? I don't know about you, but 2024 had 4 very distinct seasons: fall, winter, spring, and brat summer. Some of you might know where I'm going with this example. So on June 7th, 2024, British singer Charli XCX released her 6th studio album called Brat. And this album instantly became a cultural sensation. Everything about the album, the songs, the sound, the lyrics, the aesthetic of the album cover, the neon green square with the word brat superimposed on it, everything about it. Like, it became an aesthetic, a lifestyle, a cultural moment. It was named Album of the Year by multiple publications, including Rolling Stone and Billboard and Entertainment Weekly, and even yours truly. I was literally listening to this album while I was working my 9 to 5 in consulting. I was literally in the office listening to these songs about doing coke while making a spreadsheet in Excel. Okay, me, a person who doesn't even drink, listening to songs about coke and stuff like that. Even now, not a day or two goes by where I don't listen to a couple of tracks from that album. I was literally listening to it today as I was coming home from getting my eyebrows done before this episode. So Brat just took the girlies by storm. And you can imagine the emotional roller coaster that an artist goes through after experiencing success of that kind. That album was what propelled Charli XCX from being a more underground artist with more of a cult following to somebody who was fully mainstream. And she was always signed to a major record label. She was still pretty mainstream, but that's what pushed her to like fully enter the mainstream, to go from being a C or B list celebrity to an A list celebrity. And Charli followed up these albums with deluxe versions and remixes later on in 2024. And as the hype died down a little bit, people started asking the question, the inevitable question, is there going to be a Brat 2? And you know what her answer was? I'm literally going to quote from an interview that she gave. She said, "I feel that you can never really do the same thing twice. And my next record will probably be a flop, which I'm down for, to be honest." That was the worst British accent you've ever heard. Erase that from your ears.
Do you feel any kind of pressure to follow up Brat at all? No, because that's just something that from the second I made that album, I knew I would like never do. You know, like I think whenever I make a record, I'm like, oh, okay, like that's that done.
That was a clip from her recent interview with Rolling Stone for their July-August 2026 edition. And that captures this so well. Because on July 24th, 2026, Charli is dropping her next album called Music, Fashion, Film. And she's already released 2 singles from the album, Rock Music and SS26, which have a completely different sound and vibe from any of the tracks on Brat. These ones have, as the name implies, more of a rock vibe, more guitar. It's completely different. Completely different. And the way Charli reinvents herself and changes the vibe of her music, and even she said her albums repel against each other. The way she does something new every single time rather than recreating something successful shows exactly the mindset of a person who's not stuck in the past. She said in that Rolling Stone interview that she looks at her career as pre and post Brat, because like I said, that's what propelled her fully into the mainstream. And a lot of people who didn't listen to her before Brat became Charli fans after Brat. And so she views that album as a defining moment of her career, but she doesn't see it as something to recreate because it's not creatively rewarding to do something twice. And as we're going to talk about in a few minutes, Charli exemplifies a lot of the things that I'm going to be discussing, that I'm going to be encouraging you baddies to do when looking at the past and visiting the past to shape your future. So we never do something twice, unless it's the greatest movie of all time, Shrek 2. But what you need to understand is that life is a game. And when you're stuck in the past, your piece is just sitting on go. It's not moving, it's just sitting there. While all the other pieces pass you by and go on with their lives and collect properties and get money from the bank, you're stuck on go. And you didn't even pass go, so you can't even collect $200. Somehow this game has turned into Monopoly. So with that, let's now turn our attention to how to get your piece moving. So there are 7 things that I'm going to suggest you do. You don't have to do all of these. Pick and choose which ones work best for you at this given moment in your life. And the reason I chose 7, we're doing a lot of lists in this episode. The reason I chose 7 is because 7 is my favorite number. I was born in 1997. I compete in the 57 kilogram weight class in powerlifting. If you've gotten my book off of Amazon, you may have noticed it ends in 97 cents. Like on Amazon Canada, it's $27.97 because I was 27 when I published it and I'm born in 1997. In Europe, it's 19 euros and 97 cents purely because that's my birth year. So I have an affinity to the number 7. So number 1 on our list is to let go of the past by writing things down. I do this a lot and I really, really, really encourage you to do this as well. Go write a letter to yourself entitled "The Old," whatever your name is dead. I literally have a letter written to myself in my notebook called "The Old Nikki is Dead." I have a notebook solely for writing myself letters. And it's so freeing writing to yourself. It's so freeing getting things out of your brain and putting them on paper. Especially things you might not want to tell other people. It's still cathartic to get it out. Just get it out of your mind. So write a letter to yourself. I highly encourage it to be "The Old is Dead," but there's a little bit of homework you need to do before that because you can't just go write things willy-nilly. You need to believe them first. So for the next few days, think about how you're going to update your outdated software. Think about the mindsets, the little habits that you have that are driven by fear, guilt, grief, that are holding you back. Okay? And start to think of what a higher version of yourself looks like. So maybe the first letter you write is actually an outline of what higher you looks like. What time does she wake up? What does she like to eat for breakfast? What does her email inbox look like? How does she go about her day? What does she wear? What shoes is she wearing? Is she walking down the hallway sounding like the school principal with her heels? Click, 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 click. That's me. I love when I can hear my heels. Write all these little details about what that higher version of yourself looks like. How much money is she making? What's her job? Does she have a husband? Does she have a husband and a boyfriend? Does she have a husband and a boyfriend and a girlfriend? Whatever it is, it might benefit you from writing down who that higher version of you looks like, what the higher version of you looks like, and then get to updating your software based off of that. And then when you have a good sense of which behaviors and mindsets you need to relinquish, then you can write the letter of "The Old so-and-so is dead." Which reminds me, I might have to kill off this version of myself soon. I'm constantly reinventing myself. Go watch my first episode and then come watch this one. And you'll see such a huge difference. Okay? Number 2, treat the past as a place you visit. The past can be a great place. It's a place with a lot of experiences, lessons, mistakes, memories, a lot of things that we can learn from. So the past is not, I'm not saying to completely erase the past and never look back at it. Use the past to learn, to update, but don't stay there. You're a visitor there, okay? You do not overstay your welcome. Number 3, use the past to give yourself peace. And this relates directly to the zero-sum thinking that we need to unlearn. Because you have to look back on the past and think to yourself, if I did that once, I can do it again. If I got one interview, then I can get another interview. If I was able to nail that presentation, I can nail this presentation. If I've done it once, I can do it again. Okay, you're not stealing, you're not taking things from future versions of yourself. The future is abundant. So start thinking of it that way. Number 4, take decisive action. Okay, stop dilly-dallying, stop being indecisive, stop thinking, oh, but should I? Stop negotiating with yourself. It is better to ask for forgiveness than to seek permission. So you need to stand on business. And when you are somebody who's indecisive, people pick up on that and they will respect you less, or they'll be more likely to push your boundaries because they know that you dilly-dally. So cut it out. Take decisive action. And this leads me to number 5, which is to act before you feel ready. This is really, really, really important. If you wait for the right time to do anything, you're never going to find it. If you look for time, you're not going to find it. If you look for the right time, you're not going to find it. Okay? It's the same thing with power. If you look for power, if you ask for power, you're not going to get it. Power is either taken or it's created. And it's the same thing with taking decisive action and doing things before you feel ready. Do you think I felt ready when I quit my 9 to 5? Do you think I felt ready when I quit the job that was making me 6 figures to start from scratch? No, but I did it anyway. You waiting to feel ready is a way of procrastinating. It's a way that your fear is yanking you back by the shirt collar and holding you hostage in the past, or holding you hostage in the present even. So stop waiting for the right time. Number 6, and I want you to be careful with this one, and I'm going to explain to you what I mean. Destroy your return path. Sometimes not giving yourself a choice, sometimes creating urgency is the best way to get your ass in gear. So for me, when I quit my job, I didn't go on leave. I didn't take a 1-year unpaid leave. I quit. Past tense of quit for any of you who's new here. When I did that, I destroyed my return path. I said to myself, okay, it's either this succeeds, this podcast, this YouTube, this book succeeds, or I don't eat. Okay? So when you have your back up against a wall sometimes, that's what it might take for you to get your ass in gear. But I want you to be careful with this. Don't go burning bridges. Don't go quit your job because Nikki told you to. I did not tell you to do that. Be careful with this and understand what you respond to. You don't want to be in a desperate mode. You don't want to be in survival mode if you quit your job and now you're like, oh my God, like, what do I do? But you know best, whatever project, endeavor, whatever it is that you're thinking about in your life, ask yourself if destroying that return path is going to help you. Because it could help, it could hinder. So I'm going to leave it to you. But something that reminded me of this is research that's shown that the 4-day work week, a 32-hour work week, is more productive than a 5-day, 40-hour work week. Because when you have less time to do something, you just get that thing done in less time. If you have more time, if you have 40 hours to do your tasks, then you're going to fill that 40 hours. Most of it is going to be dilly-dallying. So urgency and having your back up against a wall could be the best thing for you. And number 7, this is my favorite. I saved this for last. Understand that everything has a delay. A flower doesn't grow on the same day that you planted the seeds. That's actually from a novel I just finished called Liberty Street by the author Heather Marshall. Oh my goodness, highly recommend this novel. It's actually on my bookshelf now behind me if you're watching this on YouTube or Patreon. The bookshelf behind me only has nonfiction books, but now Liberty Street and one of my other favorite fiction books called Call Her Barbie, which is a historical fiction about how Barbie was created. Those are my only 2 fiction books on this entire shelf because I love them so much. And it's actually a book about a journalist who goes undercover in a women's prison to write a story about the abuse and neglect and the horrendous abuse of power that happens there. It's amazing. And it's based on true events. And it's based in Toronto. So I knew all the landmarks they were talking about. And the prison actually existed. It was demolished in 1969. Yeah, okay. We're getting off of track. So number 7 was to understand everything has a delay. So that flower, that seed that you plant, it's not going to become a flower on that same day. It's going to take weeks or months of sunlight, watering, maybe fertilizer, love, singing to it, whatever, to make it grow. Okay? Because whatever you're doing now is going to materialize in the future. And whatever you have now is the result of things that you did in the past. I hope that makes sense. The decisions you made in the past have led you to this moment. For example, if you've been trying to lose weight, then the dieting and the exercise that you've done over the last few months have led to the body that you have now. This body was not made today. And it's the same thing with the future. So everything has a delay. And in this world of instant gratification and constant dopamine, we want things to happen now. We want an answer to that email now. We want to hear back now. We want a reward right now. We want to scroll right now. Like everything needs to happen now. But things have a delay. So remember that. It might be silent. It might look like nothing is happening. But that's usually when things are going on behind the scenes, under the soil. That plant is getting roots and those little shoots are coming out. And you might not be able to see it yet, but things are happening. And with that, I want to give a couple of caveats before we end off the episode. Like I mentioned, the past is a place that you visit. And sometimes it can be full of lessons and learning and experiences and things that you can take away and learn from. Okay, so don't write off the past and don't say that, okay, Nikki told me to avoid nostalgia like the plague, so I'm just never going to look back. That's not what I said. Don't twist my words. So understand when you can go and learn from the past, but as a visitor, not as a squatter. And sometimes it helps to look at the past to remind yourself of what you never want to do again. If you've been in a really bad situation, like a really bad job, a really bad relationship, and you look back and you think, I never want to be in that situation again, let that be the fire under your to push you forward. Sometimes that's what it takes. Or looking at somebody and being like, oh, I never want to be like this person. You know what I mean? So sometimes it does help to go into the past to see what you don't want. And honestly, sometimes things were truly better. Something I've been thinking about lately a lot is how the internet used to be confined to just one room in the house. You know, the family computer was in the office or the guest room or whatever, and that's where the internet lived. The internet wasn't something that you took with you everywhere to the bathroom. It was in your purse. It was on the kitchen table. It was confined to one room. And I look back at that time very fondly, but then I also snap out of it and I'm like, if it weren't for the internet being so ubiquitous, then my career would not have taken off. So there's two sides to everything. Sometimes things are really pleasant and we like to look back fondly on memories, but remember that there's always a downside to things. And we're going to look back on this moment and find the downsides with that too. So being in a state of constant reinvention, improvement, and being on a path towards self-actualization is the best thing you can do for yourself as a woman living in the patriarchy. And that comes from decoupling the future from aging, decoupling the future from withering away, like from you withering away. Decouple the future from the biological clock. You only get better as time goes on. And that's a fact. All right, so I'm going to leave you baddies with that. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. If you like the show, you like hearing me talk, you can give the podcast a 5-star rating, like, comment, subscribe, all those things. And just don't forget that you are the baddest bitch in any building that you set foot in. Until next time, stay bad. Love you. Bye. All right, class, I'm going to do roll call of all the baddies who are supporting on Patreon. When you hear your name, please raise your hand. Kate, Danny, Lindsay, Emberly, Brittany, Hannah, Nadine, Amanda, Kitty, Red, Lisa, Melissa, Yelena, Adriana, Gemma, Naomi, Nilufar, Nadia, Melinda, Sophia M, Sophia K, Amara, and Kat. I am so grateful for every single one of you. Thank you all so much for your support. The benefit of the doubt is based mainly on two things, and both of them make you look weak. The first one is a projection of what you think the person ought to do, what you would do if you were in their shoes. First of all, I would never put myself in someone's dad's sneakers or Crocs, okay? If I put myself in someone else's shoes, then I'm a baddie in ugly shoes.